Davis had always believed he could keep emotions out of his work. As a private investigator in Lagos, he had handled cheating spouses, fraud cases, missing persons, and even corporate espionage. And he had learned to detach. It was the only way to survive the job. So when a wealthy businessman named Mr. Dele Olawale contacted him for the first time, requesting surveillance on his wife, Davis approached the case with the same professionalism he always maintained. He didn't know then that this job would drag him into a storm of blood, betrayal, and consequences he never imagined facing again. A job like any other, or so he thought. Their first meeting was brief. Dele was a tall, calculating man with sharp eyes that seemed to weigh a person's soul before choosing whether it was worth keeping. I want you to follow my wife, Dele said simply. Her name is Toyin. I believe she might be saying someone. Davis nodded, taking notes. Standard case, simple enough. Do not confront her, Dele added. Just bring me evidence. Their conversation lasted less than 10 minutes. And as David walked out of the office, he didn't think twice about the job until later. When he replayed Dele's cold, dismissive tone, a small knot formed in his gut. There was something dangerous about the man, something cruel, but work was work. For the first few days, everything looked normal. Toyin dropped her kids at school, went shopping, visited her mother, and attended a charity meeting. Nothing unusual. Davis wrote his report and submitted them. On the fifth day, she visited a spa. On the seventh day, she went to an art gallery with two friends. For 2 weeks, there was no sign of infidelity. Then, on the 15th day, something shifted. Toyin left the house earlier than usual. Unaccompanied by her driver, she looked nervous. She kept checking the rearview mirror. Davis followed discreetly, curiosity sharpening. She drove to a quiet restaurant in town and picked up a small wrapped package. She handled it carefully, too carefully for just food. Then she drove to a hotel. Not a random one, the kind known for secrets, not tourism. Toyin parked. The valet spoke to her with a familiarity that made Davis sit up. She laughed, too comfortably. Suspicious. She entered the hotel. Davis waited. 1 hour passed, then two, then three. By the time she stepped outside again, Davis had already prepared his camera. But he was not prepared for what he was about to see. She wasn't alone. A man walked behind her. Close, intimate. She reached for his hand gently. He held it like someone who had missed her deeply. Davis zoomed in for a better shot. The man turned. Davis froze. His heart dropped. Every muscle locked. The camera slipped slightly because the man walking beside the client's wife was Sammy, his older brother. His only surviving family. The same brother he had not spoken to in 5 years, ever since their years of bitterness, resentment, and betrayal. Suddenly, the job was no longer a job. It was personal, too personal. The memories hit Davis like a storm, wide, violent, and impossible to escape. He could still see the day of the accident as if it were a painting, permanently etched in his mind. The phone call, the trembling hands. In a single night, the world he knew folded into darkness. Their parents, his shield, his comforts were gone, just like that. In the chaos that followed, responsibilities wrapped itself around their lives like an unwelcome shadow. The right shop struggled, and life became a daily test of survival. But through it all, one person held everything together: Sammy. Sammy, his older brother. Sammy, who had suddenly become a father, mother, and guardian all at once. Sammy, who had quit his carefree lifestyle and taken over their father's rice business. Sammy, who worked morning till night, taking orders, loading bags, chasing suppliers just to keep them fed. He paid for David's WAEC fees without complaint. He attended PTA meetings like a parent, scolded like a father, encouraged like a mother. Davis remembered watching him fall asleep on the shop counter some nights, too exhausted to even make it to his bed. In those days, Sammy was his hero, his one-man army. But something happened when Davis gained admission into the university. Something neither of them could fully explain. Sammy changed. It began slowly: new friends, late nights, small lies, missing money, then it grew into something monstrous. Sammy became a party king. The man who once disciplined drunken men at the shop now drowned himself in beer and costly gin. The one who used to warn Davis about bad company was now surrounded by women, smoke, and loud music. The rice business, once their father's pride, crumbled under his reckless spending. Bags of rice disappeared, debts grew, suppliers stopped coming, and by the time Davis entered his second year in school, the truth slapped him in the face. The money was gone, all of it. School fees unpaid, house rent overdue, no goods left in the shop, nothing. And as if that wasn't enough, Sammy struck the final blow: the betrayal. So sharp that it carved hatred into David's heart. He sold their house, their only remaining property, without telling him, without explanation, without shame. It wasn't just a house, it was memories, it was securities, it was their parents' legacy. Davis remembered the day he found out. He had stood in front of the compound, clutching his bag of clothes, staring at strangers who now claimed ownership of the home he grew up in. That was the day something in him broke, not loudly, not visibly, but deeply. From that point on, survival was no longer about living, it was about enduring. He worked himself into exhaustion just to stay in school. He wrote assignments for students who barely knew his name. He carried loads in the market until his shoulders dropped. He tutored secondary school students for 1,000 naira, sometimes less. He slept on friends' floor, in classrooms, and sometimes in unfinished buildings he worked in. Graduation wasn't a celebration, it was a battle he crawled out of, bruised but undefeated. But through it all, he made a vow, cold and final: he would never speak to Sammy again. Not in 2 years, not in 10 years, not ever. 5 years passed like a silent war. No calls, no tests, no family gatherings, nothing. Davis built his life from scratch, piece by painful pieces. He learned to live without the brother who had once been his world. But life had its own wicked sense of humor, a way of dragging old wounds into new chapters. Because now, here he was, staring at the unimaginable truth. Sammy, the same brother who had destroyed their lives, was the one secretly sleeping with the wife of the man paying Davis' salary. The word spun. The hatred he thought he had buried burst open like a wound that never healed. Life, it seemed, had circled back to remind him of something. Some storms never really pass. They only wait for the right moment to return. Davis drove home that night with his mind spinning. Should he tell Dele? Should he protect his brother? Should he expose him for the pain he caused years ago? Did blood still matter? For days he barely slept. He thought of the times Sammy beat bullies for him in secondary school. The night Sammy went without food so he could eat. The pride Sammy showed when he wrote his WAEC. Then he remembered the betrayal, the irresponsibility, the selfishness, the homelessness. The wound reopened. Davis drove home that night with his mind spinning. Professionally, it is completely wrong to tip off the culprit. Doing so is a breach of trust and a direct violation of the rules of engagement. In most cases, a backroom service, a spy-on-spy operation, is employed to verify the authenticity of your information. Therefore, giving a false report out of selfish interest is not only counterproductive, but also highly unprofessional and unwise. Should he tell Dele? Should he protect his brother? Should he expose him for the pain he caused years ago? Did blood still matter? For days he barely slept. He thought of the time Sammy beat bullies for him in secondary school. The night Sammy went without food so he could eat. The pride Sammy showed when he passed his WAEC. Then he remembered the betrayal, the irresponsibility, the selfishness, the homelessness. The wound reopened. One thing guided him. Dele was a dangerous man. If Dele discovered Sammy's identity, he wouldn't hesitate to kill him and maybe Davis too to bury the secret. So Davis made a calculated move. He anonymously hired another private investigator, someone skilled and unknown, and assigned him to investigate Dele himself. If Dele was cheating too, then Davis could use that information to protect himself and Sammy. The second investigator delivered the result in less than 2 weeks. Mr. Daly had a mistress and a child outside his marriage. Davis created a fake identity and sent a cryptic warning to Sammy. Someone is after you. Leave town now. He didn't want him to know it came from him. Then he took the evidence of Daly's cheating and sent it to Toyin. Showed the investigator disguised as a woman, meeting her at school drop-off. The envelope contained the mistress photo, the child's birth certificate, the woman's address, Dele's hidden apartment. Toyin world shattered. She had never cheated until Dele began disappearing for weeks, feeding her excuses. Now the puzzle finally made sense. There was war coming. Sammy always believed he was untouchable. He did not leave town. So Dele sent men to Sammy's address, one Davis himself had provided as part of the job. They waited outside the compound, studying the photo, ready to strike. When Sammy walked past them, he instantly sensed trouble. Years of street life had sharpened his instincts. He rushed inside, grabbed the pistol under his bed. The men followed. They wanted it quiet, a quick strangling. But the moment Sammy heard soft footsteps at his door, he pulled the trigger. The gunfight erupted. Bullets everywhere. Sammy was hit in the shoulder, but escaped through the back fence, bleeding. He vanished before the men could catch him. The next morning, Daly was furious. He summoned Davis. Within an hour, Davis arrived at the office, pretending to be clueless. Daly studied him quietly. Davis, who exactly did you say that young man is? I gave you all the information I gathered, sir. Davis replied calmly. If you are not satisfied, you can hire someone else. Daly stared at him. For a moment, Davis thought he had been exposed. But eventually, Daly said, no problem, you may go. Davis left the building with shaky breath. Days passed. Weeks turned to months. No calls, no threats, no questions. Sammy disappeared completely. Davis tried to find him but found nothing. No address, no friends, no trace. Maybe he had started over. Maybe he had died. Maybe he had finally grown a conscience. Davis no longer knew. As for Toyin, he never followed her story after the envelope delivery. Whatever storms happened in that household were no longer his concern. He had done what he could. He had protected himself. He had protected Sammy, even if Sammy didn't know. He had survived a job that could have buried him. Sometimes David still wondered, had he made the right choice? Did Sammy deserve saving? Was blood truly thicker than water? He didn't know, but he knew this. If he had let Dele discover the truth, two bodies would have been buried, his and Sammy's, and no case was worth dying for. In the darkness of human secrets, survival was often the only justice. And so Davis moved on, carrying the shoulder of his family, his choices, and the blood he almost lost forever. Thank you for listening. Kindly subscribe, comment, like, and share.